A Buffalo Bills news update, injury recap, game predictions for Sunday, and prospects to watch on Saturday are all coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. Well, folks, this is the last time we'll have a chance to speak before the Buffalo Bills take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 5. Buffalo, of course, looking to improve to 4-1. And so today we have quite a bit of newsy items that have come through this week that we haven't had a chance to speak about. We're going to talk to Dr. Kyle Trimble about a very lengthy injury situation once again for the Buffalo Bills. I've got 5 predictions for the game on Sunday. And then, of course, our prospects, our NFL draft prospects to watch on Saturday with an eye towards the Buffalo Bills. Let's get started with some newsy stuff. And congratulations, first of all, to Jordan Poyer, who was named Defensive Player of the Week for his efforts against the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, the 2 interceptions, both game-changing plays. And this is the first time in his career that he's been named Defensive Player of the Week. And it's the first Bills Defensive Player of the Week honoree since Greg Rousseau last year, Week 5. If you guys remember the Kansas City game, he was honored with Defensive Player of the Week. So well-deserved there for Jordan Poyer. And my goodness, 4 interceptions in 3 games played so far this season. The guy is on an unbelievable pace right now, obviously, with his contract extension looming. He is showing out. The Bills made several additions to the practice squad, and that, of course, comes with several subtractions. So the 3 players that are now off the practice squad are defensive tackles C.J. Brewer and Prince Emili. And Prince Emili actually played pretty well against Baltimore. So we'll see, what that looks like long-term, because he's a player I'd love to get back on there. But also Tavon Austin, right? That's kind of the big one. Wide receiver Tavon Austin released from the practice squad. On the heels of a lot of praise for Tavon Austin for the job that he did being Lamar Jackson on the scout team throughout the course of the week to get ready for Baltimore. Sal Capaccio reports early in the week that the 2 parties, the Bills and Tavon Austin, have agreed to mutually part ways. And it sounds like the root of it was Austin's lack of ability to get on the field and help the team. And the timing is odd because you feel like that opportunity is kind of here with Jake Kumaro banged up. Jamison Crowder, it kind of feels like it's inevitable for him to be placed on IR. And Tavon Austin just kind of being very naturally a good fit to step into the active roster, especially because he has upside as a return guy and kind of gives you some of what you lost there in a Jamison Crowder. But doesn't sound like the 2 parties were aligned on the path forward, and Tavon Austin is no longer on the Bills practice squad. Now, the Bills did add 3 players to the practice squad. Some familiar faces here. All of these guys have been around before. The big one is Justin Zimmer, defensive tackle. Obviously, we all remember him for the was it the forced fumble against Cam Newton several years ago when Cam was on the Patriots and they were kind of driving to win the game, and Justin Zimmer came up with a big hustle play, and that's kind of always been what he's done, is provide a lot of energy and hustle, and is a really nice rotational player. And so you add him to your practice squad to go with the 5 on the active roster. So you have Oliver, Phillips, both on the active roster, both injured. We'll see what their status is for this week. But Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, Brandon Bryant's on the active roster at defensive tackle. And now you have Justin Zimmer and another new addition, Eli Ankou, back to your practice squad. And Anku's been a player that has been around for a while. He's been called up and played well at times. And I'm excited to have him back. I think the Bills' depth at defensive tackle in the practice squad in Zimmer and Anku is really, really outstanding. And then a developmental corner in Jordan Miller, who spent some time with the team this preseason. So some familiar faces to kind of restock this practice squad. Two other notes here that I want to get into. First, Trey White. This was the first week that he was eligible to return to practice, right? You go on the PUP list, and after 4 games, you can then start practicing and then be put on the active roster within kind of a 21-day window. The Bills did not start that. So Trey White, the earliest he could return was this week. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And so as I've speculated all along, into the disappointment of many, I said, hey, I don't think we get Trey White until after the bye. Well, it's kind of stacking up that way. Now, they could still activate him, and he could play against Kansas City next week. I have a feeling that that won't be the case. And it's, again, a post-bye situation for Trey White to step back into the lineup. And look, there's no reason to rush him. There's really not. Even with Christian Benford injured. What you've seen from Dane Jackson, what you've seen from Kyer Elam, it really kind of takes any urgency off of rushing anyone back. And we know the Bills aren't rushing anyone back, and Trey White was never going to be the exception. Give him all the time he needs, so that way when Trey White comes back, Trey White can be Trey White. And that's going to make this defense even better. Last thing I want to mention here is Cole Beasley retired. Cole Beasley retired. He signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was there for 2 weeks, and said, I'm done. And so it's kind of interesting to see him get released from the Bills, him have some things to say about the way the organization changed, for him to talk about all the opportunities that he has and is just going to kind of wait for the right one. We get into the season. The Bucs have several injuries at receiver. They signed Cole Beasley to the practice squad 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he retires. Now, good for Cole. He goes out on his own terms. But there's something about the end in Buffalo to the end of his career that kind of makes you ask some questions. But obviously a good career for him. Was very helpful for the Bills for a couple of years. Meant a lot to Josh Allen. I'm appreciative of what he did for this football team, and he's called it a career, but obviously a pretty weird end to how this all goes. And look, credit to him. He gets to go out on his own terms, right? He gets to make that decision for himself. And so best regards to him and his family in his retirement. All right, here's a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone, and you need the absolute strongest defense you can muster. This is why I use and trust Simply Safe Home Security. At Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you know your home is always safe. Simply Safe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and outside your home. Smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real. And even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. You can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. You can save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no place like Simply Safe. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting information this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. I'm joined now by Kyle Trimble. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He runs bangedupbills.com. Follow him on Twitter at bangedupbills. And once again, we got a lot to talk about here today in this injury update. And look, we're just going to kind of break this up into really 4 different conversation points where it's players we don't expect to play, players that might play and are kind of surprising, the defensive tackles, and then a couple of wide receivers. So let's start with 3 players that I'm guessing, Kyle, you're going to tell me we're not going to see on Sunday. Cornerback Christian Benford with a hand, Jamison Crowder, wide receiver, with an ankle, and then is it Jake Kumaro also with an ankle at wide receiver? If you could just touch on them, and I guess where I really get interested in is why haven't we seen anybody placed on IR here? Is there some hope there that these guys are going to be back quicker than we think?
Well, going down the list here, we know that Benford broke his hand against the Dolphins in the he broke his hand against the Dolphins and came back and played special teams exclusively with the club. He did have surgery. We know that because he had stitches in his right hand during practice today, and he's had bracing on there and whatnot. So it wasn't expected that he was going to play. We saw that Dawson Knox missed about the same amount of time with a broken hand last year, though he has to catch, and we have to be mindful of that. But I expected him to return after the bye, only because I figured that he'd be better with his hands than with a club. But if the team wanted to return him with a club in week 6, he could be okay to do that. It just depends on what they want to do with him. But he's not going to play, and he has a practice all week. As for Jamison Crowder, I don't know why he hasn't been put on IR yet. My only theory is that they're waiting to elevate somebody from the practice squad, or that'd be the only way you could do that, because you couldn't sign anybody to play that quickly without knowing the playbook. So I assume they're waiting to put him on IR on Saturday, bring somebody up with the practice squad, and then Steelers can't game plan, or at least review the film as efficiently with that new person up there, whether it's Isaiah Hodgins or Tanner Gentry or whoever they want to bring up. But he broke his ankle. It looked like a ankle fracture dislocation, because it looked like a high ankle sprain when he suffered it during a punt return with 14 minutes left in the third quarter of the Ravens game. So it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. And there is a chance that he could return early in the playoffs, but that's like everything going perfect. And we're seeing how conservative they are with injuries this year. Unless they are down to their last practice squad guys, I don't see how he plays again this season. And then Jake Kumaro, he suffered a high ankle sprain on the left side against the Miami Dolphins, and then he has been out since then, not practiced in the past 2 weeks. I also expect him to return after the bye, just giving about that month, and we're seeing that time frame in real time as they deal with the Ed Oliver injury, which we'll get to shortly. But they're just taking their time with it and knowing they don't have to rush these guys back out there.
Kyle, these are going to be the 3 players that everybody wants to hear about. They're the ones that are on my mind. And sometimes we talk beforehand, and so I have an idea of what you're going to say. I don't have any idea. I want to get into Tremaine Edmonds in the hamstring, has not practiced all week. We got Dawson Knox, who has a foot in a hamstring. It seems like he's got something different every week, has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday. And then Jordan Poyer with ribs did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. Now, before you start talking about these players, one thing that was always a good indicator to me when assessing injuries and, guessing on whether or not guys are going to be available, if they finish the game, right? If they finish the game that they just played, it's usually a pretty strong indicator that they're going to be okay. These guys did, they all finished. All 3 of those guys finished, have not practiced yet so far this week. What's going on?
I wish I could tell you exactly what's going on, but I'm going to do my best to give you an idea. So we know that Dawson Knox, he left in the second series offensively for the Bills. So that first series was that interception. And then that second series where they marched down the field for the field goal, he left at some point to go to the Blue Medical tent. I went back and reviewed the film. There wasn't anything apparent on there. I'm not even certain that he was evaluated for a hamstring injury at that time, because he continued to play through the game. If I recall, he played in 75% of the snaps of the game. So he didn't miss a ton of time with that. He could have been in for the foot injury. They could have retaped it up, did something with that. He did come into the game with a back and hip designation. Now it's a hamstring. There's something else going on here that we're not seeing, and that's pretty typical for the Bills. They're not going to give you anything more than they need to tell you. But I'm not hopeful that Knox is going to play just because we know how their history is with hamstrings, with soft tissue injuries. We're seeing that with Jordan Phillips and plenty of other guys over the years and this season. So I don't anticipate him playing unless they say we're down to our last guys, but they have Quentin Morris, they have Tommy Sweeney, they have Reggie Gilliam, they have plenty of guys at tight end they can get through this game on. So we'll give the guy a rest. He did play with a hamstring back in, I think, 2020 or 2021 and did not miss any games, but there might have been a bye week around that time, which is why he didn't miss it. So I expect to miss just because of how they've previously handled it and the amount of reps he'd have to play in the game. As for Tremaine Edmonds, he did finish the game. The only thought where he could have maybe suffered a hamstring injury was that final series where it was capped by the Jordan Poyer interception. So that was a very long series that took almost 10 minutes to play because they took 14 plays. There really wasn't a ton of timeouts, but it was a lot of time being out there. And while I didn't see him grab for anything or come up lame or anything like that, you got to wonder if maybe that was just nail in the coffin for him. And he was feeling something after the game. So they've also kept him out. He's missed 2 games. I think it was last year with a hamstring injury. I don't know that it's that severe that he's going to miss that much time again, but get him right for the Kansas City game week 6 and give them the time off this week here. So that's going to be the big thing that we need to keep in mind with that. And then Jordan Poyer, he sealed the interception, but he had the interception that led to the game-winning field goal. He came down and he landed hard on his more of his right side, just really hard. Went for x-rays after the game. And then he said he was fine. He got out of the x-ray room and said he got his wind knocked out of him. But everybody's kind of downplaying it. But then we see his ribs. Hopefully it's just sore ribs, maybe just that general contusion we see, and they're just keeping him out to avoid re-injury to the area. But if he doesn't go, that's not going to be great for him heading into, needing a new contract. But he also has been a huge not decision maker, but he's just been a huge game changer. That's what I'm looking for. And so when he's healthy, he's able to play out there. There's a huge difference when he's out there versus when he's not. So if he doesn't go, this is probably the game to do it against the Steelers. But he's the only one out of those 3 I just talked about that could actually play and still be quite effective.
Well, sounds like you're thinking they're going to be cautious with these guys, given the opponent this week and the opponent next week. So the Bills could be without some key players there in Edmonds, Knox, and Poyer. I want to ask you about these defensive tackles, Jordan Phillips, Ed Oliver. They're limited, right? They've been limited. Is this the week, or is caution going to be the theme as it relates to these defensive tackles, especially with Justin Zimmer and Eli Ankou back on the practice squad? You do have Braden Bryant on the active roster. What are you thinking here from these defensive tackles?
At this point, Oliver's missed a month. While high ankle sprains do take longer to heal than that, he's moving around pretty good at practice. I can't see how he doesn't at least try to play and get some live reps back in there, because he's going to need those live reps to be able to be ready to go for Kansas City. So to hold him out another week, yeah, he'd be healthier, but at some point you need to get back out there and see how you do against live competition. So I expect him to at least rotate through the whole defensive line. We see them do that often with their defensive tackles anyway. So if he doesn't go, I'd be kind of baffled. They've proven me wrong every week at dealing with this Ed Oliver injury. So I'm almost prepared to be wrong, but I hope they get him out there because it looks like he's ready to go. As for Jordan Phillips, he's been limited all week. I think they maybe take caution to give him one more week off, just because you see how they are with the hamstrings, as I mentioned. And then also, too, it looked like it was a more significant hamstring strain than other ones, as, for example, the Tremaine Edmonds one. So keep him out, get Ed Oliver back in. You have good depth with Ankou, Zimmer, Bryant. You got those guys out there to kind of get the job done. And the Steelers rushing attack does not scare me at all.
Let's finish on this. There's a couple of receivers that I'm curious about, and Gabe Davis is one of them. He's practiced in full, right? He's been practicing in full, but I think you could watch Gabe Davis run routes in the game and realize that, hey, man, it feels like something's holding you back with that. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that, but also Isaiah McKenzie, who's working through the concussion protocol. I think we can all agree that he's trending towards being available on Sunday. Certainly his comments on Thursday indicate that he's going to be ready to go. But I couldn't help but think about, the there's always a sensitivity as it relates to concussions, but especially lately with a Tua Tagovailoa situation. And, Isaiah McKenzie went out and he did his live podcast that he typically does each Monday with Ty Dune. And, he's out there in the public while recovering from a concussion. And so just kind of curious if you had any thoughts to offer on that as well.
So we'll have Gabe Davis first. He's been practicing a full Wednesday and Thursday, which is an excellent sign after being limited and originally suffering the injury prior to week 2. It was on that Saturday practice prior to the Titans game. So he's been practicing full. He still isn't likely 100% healthy. That's how this usually goes playing the NFL. You're just banged up and just you're either hurt or you're injured. There's a big difference with that. So he's been looking better every week. He's still not crisp, but that's something to work through there. He's having trouble cutting off to the right side. And one of the Twitter users had pointed this out to me. He goes, is Davis doing something different? Compared to Shakir, McKenzie, Diggs? And I looked at it and they're running through different drills and post patterns and curls and whatnot there. And Davis just doesn't look as crisp, but I don't know if that's more technique or whether that's injury, because some of the other guys weren't looking as crisp either, and they don't have any known injuries at this time. So it might come down to just him being not as crisp with his routes. And then of course the injury might have a part to play with it, but Diggs is really good with his routes. We see McKenzie being on point with that. Shakir has been really looking good throughout the season, more so than the preseason. So, he's going to be limited, but I think he's going to be out there and playing. And I found this doing my research for my article. So you can find this on Saturday morning. What's going to happen is that I went back and looked on week 1 when Gabe Davis injured his ankle in the 2021 season. He didn't do anything for the next few weeks after that. He had 4 receptions for 64 yards, and then he had the bye to get right. And then went for 27 receptions for 456 and 5 touchdowns beginning in week 8 after that. So once he got healthy, he took off. And we're seeing the same approach with this year. So he had 4 receptions, 88 yards, and 1 TD in week 1. So far, he's had 4 receptions for 50 yards over the past 2 games. Hasn't been productive. That bye week is in week 7. I'm hoping that after he gets some time off, he starts taking off that second half. I know it's going to be bigger for fantasy players, but I'm hoping that this is the same approach that they're going to take. Get him through these games, get him rested up, and then, second half surge there. And then going to Isaiah McKenzie. I actually was at the show. I live down in East Aurora for those that are in the Buffalo area. So it was a quick drive for me. And I went down and checked out the show. I did miss the first half where Isaiah was talking about being paralyzed. I know some people were taking, I don't want to say offense to it, but I think they were taking it out of context. I think that he was kind of stunned. It's kind of like when you're walking on ice in the wintertime, you fall down and you say, I got to just sit here for a moment, make sure nothing's broken, make sure that I'm okay. And I think that's more or less what McKenzie was doing, because once he said, hey, I'm okay, I can move around, he got up and jogged off the field there. But going to your comment in our conversation about him being in front of bright lights and, going out and doing interviews, that was my first thought with regards to would he be able to participate in the show the next day, because I do listen to Ty's content. So the fact that the concussion protocol and then even just general concussion protocols, not NFL specific, state that you want to get rest and get back to cognitive baseline there. So they did do the testing. They did identify what was going on with regards to saying that was a concussion, and then they want to make sure he's okay. If he wasn't, they would have said, no, you can't go out and do that. He seemed pretty with it. He was downplaying the concussion, making jokes of it, whatnot. But if he wasn't, the team would have said something. And the whole bright lights and talking and noise and everything that they used to do that. Now that they know more about what's going on with the concussions and try to get people back to cognitive baseline, this allows us to be a little more proactive and not say aggressive, but allow the people to do more things rather than kind of protecting them from themselves too much there. So it can be concerning from the outside looking in, but they're also not going to let him do things that he shouldn't be doing either. So he looks to be trending in the right direction for week 5, and I think he should go barring any setbacks.
He's Dr. Kyle Trimble. Always have a lot to talk about, it seems, this year. Once again, fingers crossed for a lesser discussion next week. Obviously, a big one with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kyle, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
All right, it's prediction time. I've got 5 predictions for the result of the game on Sunday between the Bills and the Steelers. My first prediction, I got a pretty bold one here. I am going to predict Kaiir Elam's first NFL interception. His first interception comes this week. Here's why. Well, first of all, one of my favorite traits about Kaiir Elam that you identified from watching him at Florida was the ball skills. The guy has great ball skills. And to this point in his NFL career, he hasn't been tested much. I think he's only been targeted 10 times in coverage. That's it. And over 100 snaps in coverage, 10 targets. And he does have 1 pass breakup, but no interceptions. I think he's going to get that this week. And the reason why isn't just because Kenny Pickett's a rookie quarterback stepping into this game. I think the style of quarterback that Kenny Pickett is against receivers that are pretty good at the catch point and probably some 50-50 chances to guys like George Pickens, I like Kaiir Elam's opportunity to make a play on the ball and come away with his first career interception. So I think he'll be tested a little bit more this week in coverage. I think you have a quarterback that's kind of willing to test man coverage, and you have receivers that have to do a lot in terms of winning at the catch point. So give me Kaiir Elam's first interception coming this week. Number 2, I have a non-quarterback throws a pass for the Steelers. So somebody not named Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, or Mason Rudolph will throw a pass for the Steelers. And the reason I am saying this is because I feel like the Steelers are certainly embracing an underdog mentality in this football game. And they're 14-point underdogs. And it's Kenny Pickett's first start. And Mike Tomlin's looking for a spark. And so what I think that encourages is creativity from Pittsburgh to kind of steal some plays. And so I'm expecting some trick plays potentially from Pittsburgh in the form of a pass. And so, whether it's a reverse pass or, a screen to a pass or a flea flicker wouldn't count because the quarterback would still throw the football, but something along those lines to introduce an element of surprise in a game where nobody's really giving you much of a chance and you're going to need some favorable things to happen to win it. So I think the Steelers will dial up a trick play. They might do a surprise onside kick. In a game like this, you have to be ready for all that type of stuff. And so the best way that I can tell you that I think it's going to happen is to predict a non-quarterback throws a pass for the Steelers. Number 3, I think the Buffalo Bills set a season high for rushing yards in this game. Their season high to this point is 125 rushing yards. I think they top that this week. Sounds like Sean McDermott really wants to get this run game on track. You heard that in his press conference this week. And he had some level of confidence about the ability to do that, given the coaching acumen and, of course, the talent on the roster. And he kind of just said, look, it's important. It feels like it's just a matter of time. And I feel like they can turn the corner this week, hopefully get a lead in this game, be able to kind of bleed things out late, pound the rock and gain some rushing yards, and maybe even have some more balance in the middle quarters. So put me down for 126 or more rushing yards for the Bills. Number 4, someone gets their first sack of the season for the Bills. Someone gets their first sack of the season for the Bills. And I'm really kind of thinking about the linebackers here, whether that's Milano, maybe a corner, Taron Johnson, safety kind of coming on a blitz, something like that. I think the Bills are going to be willing to blitz more in this game, not because they need to, not because they need to blitz to get pressure and get sacks, but because they're facing a rookie quarterback. And you want to be exotic with where you send pressure from. And that leads to different players rushing the passer, which opens the door for somebody that's not a defensive lineman to get their first sack of the season, whether that's a linebacker or a corner or a safety. So I think you'll see some of those different looks for the Bills this week, kind of dialing up some heat. And somebody that's not a defensive lineman will get their first sack of the season for the Bills. So somebody who hasn't recorded a sack yet this year records a sack for the Bills defense. And then finally, do I think the Bills win this game or not? I do think the Bills win. And I've kind of let you know what I think about this game. And I respect the Pittsburgh Steelers. I respect every team in the NFL. There's always a script for you to lose the game. It happened last year. The Bills were a markedly more talented team than Pittsburgh, but they lost the game because they had a blunder on special teams and they couldn't punch it in the red zone, right? 1 of 4 scoring touchdown in the red zone. You can lose these games. But I just feel like there's a tough script. There's so much that has to go right for Pittsburgh to win this game. First of all, I want to reiterate some stats that I brought up yesterday. Rookie quarterbacks against Sean McDermott defenses when he's with the Bills. There's been 10 starts by rookies against Sean McDermott's Bills. They're completing 57% of his passes, 165 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 15 interceptions in 10 starts. And it's not like only rookies struggle against the Bills. Most quarterbacks struggle against the Bills. This year, they're allowing just a 64.7 passer rating and 2.7 adjusted net yards per attempt against the defense. 2.7 yards. When teams drop back to pass against the Bills, they average 2.7 yards. And maybe you're saying, Joe, that's a really small sample size. You're talking about 4 games. Well, all of last year, all 17 games last year, the adjusted net yards per attempt was 3.8 yards. So we're really not that far off the pace here. And last year, the passer rating against the Bills was 65.3. So you have this really outstanding, sound pass defense against a rookie quarterback. And oh, by the way, you're getting sacks at the highest rate in the AFC. 10.2% of passing plays against you, you get a sack, and you have the lowest blitz rate in the league. It's a tough situation for Kenny Pickett. And I expect the Bills to do everything they can to make his head spin. Disguising coverage, mixing your rush. There's going to be a lot on Kenny Pickett's plate. And I go back to the script for Pittsburgh is really tough. You need for Kenny Pickett to break the trends here, right? He has to be the best rookie quarterback to ever face this Bills defense and produce results that no other quarterback could. They have to play clock control on offense, keep the chains moving, run the ball effectively, finish in the red zone. You can't turn over the ball if you're Pittsburgh. And oh, by the way, you got to slow down Josh Allen. Good luck with that. With a shorthanded defense. You're not going to have TJ Watt. You're not going to have Ahkello Witherspoon, who's your number 1 corner. You may be without other players in the secondary. It's a tough ask. And the X factor that I keep going back to is the Bills are at home. And I know that that's whatever, but this is only the second home game of the season. The Bills haven't played in front of Bills Mafia since week 2. This is going to be one heck of an environment for a football game. And the Bills owe Pittsburgh something. They beat us last year. So put me down for a Bills dub. Real quick, some prospects to watch here on Saturday. We'll take you through a journey here with a game and some prospects in every slot. 12 p.m. Eastern time, ABC Texas against Oklahoma. Focus in on Oklahoma center Andrew Rame. 6'4", 312 pounds, wears number 73. As I continue to tell you, these centers, I think they can play guard, where I think the Bills will have a need. Rame's a good player, physical and aggressive football player. I love his athleticism to go with the physicality. He wins in space. Really good range. You get him out on poles, and he's outstanding, whether that's climbing to the second level or trapping or getting out to the perimeter and hitting blocks in space. He's really good. And he's got that lateral movement ability to slide his feet and redirect and be secure in pass protection. So I watched him over the summer, and I liked him a lot, but he's only started 7 games prior to this season. So it's all about him really expanding that sample size of good play this year and solidifying himself as a prospect. But I think he's a middle round guy, starting potential, and a really physical, aggressive, and athletic player that has good tape and good fundamentals. I like Andrew Rame. Also, peep, and this is a little bonus, Oklahoma has a wide receiver by the name of Marvin Mims. I think he's discount Jahan Dotson. You guys remember him from Penn State last year, first-round pick of the Commanders. 4 touchdowns in 4 games so far for Dotson. Not a super big guy, but explosive, really good at the catch point, plays big for a smaller receiver. That's true about Marvin Mims. So if you're watching this Oklahoma offense, Rame is really good to watch, but also Marvin Mims, I think stylistically as a receiver, could really fit well into this Bills offense. Then at 4 p.m. Eastern time, put it on ESPN2, North Carolina at Miami. And I want you to focus on a receiver here. UNC wide receiver Josh Downs wears number 11, 5'10", 175 pounds. And Josh Downs is a dog. You know, he's not a big dude, but he plays big. He's explosive. He can create space for himself, very shifty and good with the ball in his hands. tremendous straight line speed, and he has the ability to win vertically. He's a big play guy. And one of the big questions with Josh going into this year was, is he a slot only? And I got a chance to talk with Josh at ACC Kickoff, which is basically ACC Media Day here in Charlotte. And he said, that's one of his big things this year is he wants to show that he could play more outside. And so he almost never played outside his first couple of years at North Carolina. It's up to 20% so far this year. So he's answering that question, and he's a big play receiver. And I think there's always a place for that for this Bills offense, especially as you think about Jake Kummerow, kind of, his contract's up after this year. Crowder's contract's up after this year. Gabe Davis will be in a contract year. You're going to need to replenish some of that. And so that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about receivers with Marvin Mims and Josh Downs from North Carolina. Then at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, CBS, this is a game I will be at. I'm heading down to Tuscaloosa for Texas A&M at Alabama. And there's so many good players for Alabama. I could probably give you like 15 to watch. But to focus in on their guard tandem. The need for the Bills, obviously, at guard, but both of them are good. Right guard, Emil Ekiyor, number 55, 6'3", 307. Their left guard, Javian Cohen, number 70, 6'4", 305. I think they're both somewhere in that second, third, maybe fourth, early fourth round range. Starter traits. Both are physical, nasty guys with movement skills and power. I like Ekiyor a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more steady, where Cohen is a little more frenetic and can be a little bit reliant on momentum and not as much willing to sit on his hips. But I think they're both guys that'll get a chance to start in the NFL. But, I mean, you watch in Alabama, Henry To'o at linebacker is a first-round guy, in my opinion. Talked about the safeties last week, and Brian Branch and Jordan Battle. So there's going to be players all over that field for Alabama, and Texas A&M has some guys too. But for this one, I'm interested in that Alabama guard tandem. So I'll be at the game. If you're going to be in Tuscaloosa by chance, we'll be at World of Beer from 6 to 9 on Friday doing a live podcast, Draft Dudes, and then Saturday we'll be at the game. So if you're in town, by chance, if there's a Locked On Bills listener that's going to be in Tuscaloosa, I'll be at World of Beer from 6 to 9 on Friday night. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast and this week. Next time we'll talk will be after the Steelers game. Looking forward to it, hoping for another Victory Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Go Bills. As always, I do kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk to you again on Monday.